The sun hung low over the training yard, burning against the rows of recruits dragging through another punishing endurance drill. Sweat ran like salt into the dust, and the air tasted like iron and exhaustion. That's when Sergeant Dolan's voice cut through the chaos. Sharp, mocking, deliberate. "You call that a stance, Locke? You trying to salute or fall over?" A ripple of laughter followed, small at first, then bold. Avery didn't flinch. She reset her feet, centered her breath, and waited. Dolan circled closer, grinning the way men grin when they think power is performance. "Maybe you'll learn better with a demonstration," he said. The strike came fast, a knee driven hard into her ribs. The sound wasn't loud, but it carried, the kind of thud that silences motion. Avery's body folded for half a second, just enough for air to flee her lungs. Around them, laughter rose again, uncertain now, half afraid of its own echo. She didn't speak. She didn't glare. She just stood, her hand resting on her side for one controlled breath before she straightened. Then she nodded once, almost polite, and returned to formation. The sergeant expected defiance or tears or something to crush. What he got was nothing, and nothing unnerved him more than calm. The recruits around her began to shift uneasily, their amusement dissolving into quiet confusion. Who absorbs pain like that and doesn't even blink? Who looks at humiliation and refuses to play the part? Dolan muttered another insult, but it sounded smaller now, as if the ground itself had swallowed his authority. Avery's face revealed nothing, not rage, not pride, not pain, just a silence that weighed more than words. Later, no one could recall what drill came next. They only remembered that moment, the strike, the breath, and the way she got back up as if control itself were her armor. Night fell heavy on the base, the kind that swallows sound. The training field was empty now, but its echoes still lingered. The laughter, the impact, the way silence had reclaimed the air. By evening, everyone had heard the story. They called her the tiny SEAL wannabe, a joke passed between bunks and mess trays, always ending with a shake of the head and a laugh that sounded a little too forced. Avery didn't hear it firsthand. She didn't need to. Word travels fastest to the one who's already stopped caring. In her quarters, the fluorescent light buzzed softly as she peeled off her vest, one strap at a time. Beneath the fabric, a deep bruise was beginning to form, dark purple against pale skin, pulsing in rhythm with her breath. She pressed her fingers lightly against it, exhaled, and whispered something only she could hear. It wasn't a curse. It was a count. A slow, methodical rhythm drilled into her years ago in the surf of Coronado Bay. In her mind, fragments of BUD/S training flickered like film cuts. Endless push-ups in cold water, sand grinding into skin, instructors shouting through the roar of waves. Pain is information, one had told her. Nothing more. Back then, she'd learned to stop labeling pain as punishment. It was just feedback, a message from the body to the mind. And she'd mastered how to listen without reacting. She stared at herself in the mirror, hair damp, jaw set, eyes unreadable. The silence wasn't weakness. It was data gathering. Every laugh, every insult, every careless display of ego, all of it went somewhere in her mind, categorized, studied, waiting. She remembered a line from the SEAL Creed, one that had shaped her more than any weapon drill. Earn your silence before you demand it. Tonight, she wasn't demanding anything. She was earning it. One breath, one bruise, one calculated moment of control at a time. Long before the bruise on her ribs darkened beneath the training lights, there had been another wound, one carved in sand and chaos. Afghanistan, Helmand Province. The valley was a furnace of dust and gunfire. An Avery SEAL team had been running extraction for a stranded Marine convoy pinned under heavy fire. The radio was useless. Comms jammed, the air thick with the percussion of mortars. She remembered sprinting through a cloud of grit and metal, hearing her name over the static. Then the dull, sickening crack, her ribs fracturing as shrapnel tore past. She didn't stop. 2 Marines were down in the open, one bleeding out, the other barely conscious. She dropped beside them, returning fire with short, surgical bursts. Her breathing was sharp, controlled, pain processed, categorized, ignored. When the medevac finally arrived, she refused the stretcher until both were lifted aboard first. Only then did her body give out, the adrenaline bleeding away like color from a photograph. Inside the helicopter, the younger Marine, face pale and shaking, had turned his head toward her. "Didn't think SEALs came that small," he muttered through a grimace, trying to mask fear with humor. She smiled faintly, blood seeping through her uniform, and said, "Doesn't take size to break a trigger pull." The crewman who overheard it would later call it the calmest thing he'd ever heard in combat. That Marine, she would later learn his name. Staff Sergeant Dolan. The same man who'd driven his knee into her ribs years later on a clean American training field. Only now, he was the instructor, and she was the recruit. He didn't recognize her out of uniform. Most people never do when the power dynamic changes. And that was precisely the point. She wasn't here for validation or vengeance. Her orders were clear: observe, assess, report. The Navy had sent her undercover to evaluate leadership ethics in joint training units, to see who led with strength and who hid behind it. So when his knee struck her ribs that morning, she'd felt a shock of pain, but also clarity. Fate had circled back, perfectly aligned. The man she'd once saved had no idea he was about to be tested by the same calm that had saved him. The next morning, Avery made a quiet request: transfer to Sergeant Dolan's fire team. No one questioned it. He took it as submission, the proof he'd broken her spirit. "Guess she wants to learn from the best," he said with that same crooked grin, mistaking her composure for defeat. Avery nodded once, no sarcasm, no tone. Just silence, the kind that makes arrogant men fill the air with their own noise. Days turned into weeks. Dolan's insults became background static. Every time he barked, she simply adjusted her gear, executed every task with precision, and moved on. He believed he was teaching. In reality, she was collecting notes, timestamps, patterns. Each outburst, each safety violation, each cruel lesson was quietly recorded in her log. During rest breaks, while the others scrolled through messages or joked about off-base weekends, she checked training cams, trimming clips that captured his misconduct. The Navy had trained her for covert ops. They just never said the battlefield couldn't be domestic. At night, she coached the younger recruits, the ones Dolan broke down for sport. She corrected their stances, taught them breathing under pressure, reminded them that real strength doesn't shout. They began to change subtly, standing taller, talking less. Dolan noticed, but he couldn't trace it. He just sensed control slipping through his fingers. Then came the day he crossed the line. A live-round drill meant for simulation turned reckless when he pulled a sidearm to make a point. The recruit in front of him froze, panic blooming in his eyes. Before anyone processed it, Avery moved, not fast, just precise. Her hand snapped forward, catching his wrist mid-draw, redirecting the muzzle away. The entire range went still. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other. His pride faltered, her calm never did. Within hours, an official inquiry was launched. The footage, mysteriously surfaced, showed everything: his arrogance, her control. She filed no complaint, gave no statement, remained nameless in the report. The command called it anonymous submission of critical safety evidence. Dolan never knew where it came from, but Avery did. Sometimes the cleanest takedowns don't make noise. They just erase your authority in silence. The order came down quietly. Sergeant Dolan, report to Range 47 for a review exercise. He showed up alone, the desert wind pushing thin sheets of dust across the floodlit ground. Midnight training wasn't unusual, but something about the silence felt wrong. The usual chatter of range staff was gone. Only the low hum of the lights and the crunch of his boots. Then he saw her. Lieutenant Commander Avery Locke. No training fatigues this time. No trainee insignia. Full SEAL tactical gear. Vest buckled. Eyes steady under her night visor. The emblem on her shoulder caught the light just long enough for recognition to cut through him. His grin flickered, then held. Pride's last defense. "So it's you," he said, trying to sound amused. She didn't answer. She simply pointed to the range line. "Training engagement," she said evenly. "No contact unless contact's made." He hesitated, searching for the trick. But she just stood there, motionless, the calm of someone who'd already seen the ending. So he lunged first, a wide, heavy move meant to intimidate. She slipped past him like smoke, redirecting his strike with surgical precision. His balance broke. She pivoted, gripped his arm, and in 3 movements, he was down. The dust puffed up around his body, the sound of impact swallowed by the desert wind. He scrambled up, angrier now. You think that proves something? He spat. He swung again. A sharp knee strike aimed at her ribs, the same one that started it all. But before it landed, she turned his momentum inward, dropping him to the ground again. Faster, harder, final. She didn't shout, didn't even breathe heavily, just looked down at him, her boot pinning his shoulder, the hum of the floodlights filling the silence. Same knee, she said quietly. Different outcome. The words landed heavier than any blow. For a long second, neither moved. Then she stepped back, holstered her weapon, and walked off the range. He stayed on the ground, staring at the stars above, realizing that the woman he'd mocked had once saved his life, and just now, spared it again. Some lessons don't echo through orders. They settle in silence, and never fade. The footage played in absolute silence. Grainy night vision filled the screen. Range 47 under floodlights, two figures circling in the dust. Every officer in the room watched the moment Sergeant Dolan lunged, missed, and fell. No one spoke until the playback ended with Avery stepping out of frame, her silhouette fading into the dark. The colonel leaned forward, hands clasped. "Lieutenant Commander Locke," he said, his tone measured but curious. "Explain the incident." Avery didn't fidget, didn't even glance at the screen. "Demonstration concluded," she said. Nothing more. The room shifted, a quiet exchange of looks, a few restrained nods. They understood. This wasn't about punishment, it was about principle. The colonel exhaled slowly, signing the recommendation that would suspend Dolan from instruction duty, pending disciplinary review. His pen paused only once before he added the final note. Commendation for conduct. Exemplary restraint under provocation. When Avery's reinstatement order came across the table, she didn't celebrate. The insignia placed before her was familiar: Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy SEALs, now reassigned as lead ethics evaluator for cross-branch leadership. She slid the patch between her fingers once, then set it down gently. Someone at the table, younger, uncertain, finally asked what the others were thinking. "Ma'am, if I may, why didn't you reveal your identity earlier?" Avery looked up, her voice calm but edged with truth. "Because respect earned from fear isn't respect," she said. "It's performance." The words landed like a command themselves. The colonel leaned back, thoughtful. No one else spoke. Outside the boardroom, sunlight hit the runway. Recruits jogged in formation, loud, eager, untested. Avery stepped into the light, breathing it in. For her, the real work had just begun, not in proving strength, but in teaching it. True authority, she knew, never needed volume. It only needed proof. The mess hall buzzed with the usual noise, trays clattering, boots echoing, the low hum of conversations. But when Avery walked in, that noise thinned like mist before the wind. One by one, heads turned. Words faded. Even laughter seemed to hesitate. She didn't demand attention. The room simply offered it. At the far table, Sergeant Dolan stood. No rank dispute, no defiance, just a quiet, deliberate rise. His salute came slow, steady, a gesture not of duty, but of acknowledgement. Avery paused only long enough to meet his eyes, then gave a single nod. That was all. Respect had shifted hands. No speeches, no vindication, just understanding. As she walked past the rows of recruits, her presence carried the weight of something deeper than victory, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. She had shown them that silence can command more than any outburst ever could. Then her voice, calm and steady, slipped over the final images, the range, the dust, the echo of a boot print fading. Control isn't the absence of strength. It's the proof of it. They thought they broke her. They only revealed what was unbreakable. A slow fade to black. Then, softer. If stories like this one remind you that silence can be louder than pride, hit subscribe. It helps us keep telling them. Nothing more. No noise. Just the quiet after a lesson learned the hard way and remembered forever.